Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be working with a stamp set that came out last year, but it was in my stash. I didn't get a chance to work with it. It's really adorable. It's from MFT Stamps and it is called Cute Chemists. So it's got a little boy and a little girl there, a bunch of really great sentiments, and then of course some extra beakers and things like that to add to your scene. So I ended up making 6 cards today, and I first started out by stamping out all of the images that I could color. So I am going to use my Copics, so I've pulled out my Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and I'm going to stamp this out a bunch of times. I think I ended up doing probably 3 or 4 pages like this. When I do a stamp set and I'm not sure what all I'm going to make from it, this is usually my process. I will just cut some Nina in half, and then I will lay this out to cover only half of the page. That way I can stamp it, flip it over, stamp it again. I did actually end up stamping some of the beakers and things along the center and did the same thing, so I was able to do that twice as well. Then I will color some of them. Sometimes I wait and color them until I see how I want to put the scene together. But I will take those over to my brother's Scan and Cut, and then I have all my images in front of me to put together to create my cards. So for this first one, I'm keeping things really simple. I am on a Nina panel here, trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I'm stamping out the sentiment, "I'm sorry for my reaction." Since I had my Misty already out, I'm going to stamp the inside as well. For that, I'm going with "You Make My Beaker Bubble." And I've got my character here all colored in. I will list for you on my blog post all of the Copics that I used for him and for each of the cards. So I'll add some art glitter glue there and place him down. And then on the inside, I've grabbed one of my beakers and the little cloud explosion, and I'm going to glue those down as well. I've grabbed a card base made from MFT's Spearmint cardstock. I'll add some ATG to both of my panels and go ahead and place them down. And then I will finish up the front here by adding some glossy accents to his glasses and both of the beakers. And in just a second here, you'll see me pull in a cloud that I had stamped on some vellum. I used my VersaFine Onyx Black ink and then heat set that with some Simon Says Stamp clear embossing powder. I thought it would be fun to have some of these clouds be see-through, like they were actual smoke. So I just added a few dots of glue there and placed that down, and that will complete card number 1. For card number 2, I wanted to create a scene, so we're gonna place these little guys in a classroom setting, and I wanted to create a background that looked like a chalkboard. So I have pulled in some of my Distress Oxide. This is antique linen. I'm using the brush that came with one of the recent Simon Says Stamp kits. I'm actually really loving this brush. The more that I use it, I may invest in getting a set of these. But I'm just taking this, I've sped things up quite a bit here. I wanted a chalky look, but I didn't want it to be too dark. So I'm just sort of tapping that on my ink and then running that across to sort of get that wiped line as though they've been working and, finally came up with their working equation. So I'm gonna stamp my sentiment, again, using that antique linen. You'll see I stamped this twice here, and then I want it to be a little bit more white. It just wasn't giving me exactly the chalk look that I was going for. So I will also pull in some Hero Arts Unicorn Pigment ink, and I will also stamp twice with that. And here you'll see this just lets it pop just a little bit more. I did want to add some things on the chalkboard here, so I've pulled in these, I guess they're supposed to be little molecule clusters, and I'm going to go ahead and do these the exact same way. I'll stamp them twice with the Distress Oxide Antique Linen and twice with that Unicorn ink. Now that I have my pattern, I'm going to fill in the rest of the scene. So I have pulled in some paper tray ink cocoa bean cardstock. That's going to create my floor, and that measures a 1/2 inch. I'm going to glue that straight to the bottom. I then took some MFT tropical teal, and I did go ahead, it's hard to see on camera, but I did take that to my scoring board and I added a score line every 1/4 inch just to give that a little more texture and interest. That piece measures 1 1/4 inches. And then this last piece, I wanted to create that little chalk or eraser tray that holds the chalk and the eraser. So I've also pulled in a 1/4 inch of, let's see, this is MFT's Gravel Gray. So I will pop that up for a little dimension there with some 1/8 inch foam tape. Now that I've got everything pressed into place, I'm also going to pop up my characters here, just adding some foam dots, avoiding that place where the chalkboard or the chalk tray is going to be behind them. And then of course I want some little clouds of smoke coming out of their beakers. So just getting everything laid out. And then I'll go ahead and press my characters into place. And then I will go ahead and glue my little clouds into place with some art glitter glue. For the inside, I'm just going to use this last boom sentiment. I'm only going to ink up. I could have done some stamp surgery here, but I wanted to keep everything together for the moment. So I'm just going to strategically just place ink on that last boom there and stamp that out. And then since my front was so busy, I'm just going to finish up the inside here with a stripe of, this is Sweet Blush from Paper Tray Ink, and that's about a 1/4 inch wide. Added some 1/8 inch Scor-Tape behind there. I'll press that down, trim away the excess, add some ATG. Oh, I ran out of ATG there, so I'm going to have to finish up with some Scor-Tape. And I'll press that on the inside of my card base. And this is MFT Black Licorice card base, if I forgot to mention that. And that will complete card number 2. So here for card number 3, I'm going to create a background using these little molecules here. I am stamping using some American Crafts blush pigment ink. And I'm just helping to keep my paper straight. I'm using those grid lines to get these stamps lined up as straight as I can. I know it's hard to see, but I really needed to sort of be over top of what I was doing to line everything up. So I did use a little bit of Post-it tape there just to hold my paper in place. There you can see I stamped a bunch of those, just creating a background. And then I've got my 2 little characters here. I wanted it to look like they were both holding that beaker, so I've just added a little bit of glue on the one that his hand was holding, and I'm layering the 2 together here. I wasn't sure if I was going to pop them up or not, but I will end up popping the sentiment up and gluing them straight down, but for now I just wanted to sort of get them together for placement. There I'll add a few dots of glue to another one of those vellum clouds and place that down on top here. My card base is made from Stamp Market cherry cardstock, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment here on Stamp Market blush cardstock. I went with We Have Serious Chemistry. And then I've trimmed that down, added a little angle there. Gonna add some ATG to the back of my panel, and I'll place that on top of my card base. And then I'll glue my little characters down in place. And I'll grab some of my 1/2" foam tape to pop up my sentiment. For the inside, I'm again on a Nina panel. This one is trimmed to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Stamping out the sentiment, "You make my beaker bubble." And then I'm going to grab one of these beakers and I'm going to go back to that blush pigment ink and I'll stamp some of these little hearts. I'll add some ATG to the back of my panel and then place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 3. Card number 4 is very similar to the last one. I've just done it a little more simpler. So I'm starting off with some black licorice cardstock here. I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "We have serious chemistry." I'm using my Versamark ink for that. And then I will go ahead and heat set that using some Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail White. I did hit that with my powder tool there to make sure nothing sticks where I don't want it. Since I had my Misty out, I'm going to stamp the inside as well, and I went with Let's Bond. I then pulled in some Lawn Fawn Peachy Keen ink, and I'm going to stamp a few of these molecules down towards the bottom of the panel. I'll go ahead here and get my characters added down to the front. And I'm going to trim out my sentiment. I'm going to add some ATG and get my panel put into place, and then I will go ahead and pop up that sentiment again using some foam tape. There, I decided to add an angle to the edge, and I'll go ahead and place that down. I'll add some ATG to my inside panel and place that on the inside of my card base. This card base is made from MFT Tickled Pink cardstock. And that will complete card number 4. For card number 5, I wanted to create another scene, and this just felt like sort of a classroom set to me. So this time we're going to go back to that same classroom, but I'm going to create a little table for them to be working on. So the measurements for the cardstock are 3/4 of an inch for the brown, and then the teal is 2 inches. The table is made from cement gray. That's an MFT cardstock, and that measures 1.5 inches high and 3 3/4 wide. And then the darker strip of gray across the top is 3/8 of an inch wide. So I did go ahead and make my sort of chalkboard background exactly the same way I did before. There I'm lining up to make sure my sentiment is going to fit. I decided to go with "I've got my eye on you." And now I'll go ahead and get everything put into place. So I just sort of keep laying things out when I'm doing a card like this to make sure that it's fitting the way that I want it to. And that way I know where to place everything down. Of course, I'll work from the back forward. So I'm going to glue the guy down first. Press him into place. And then again, just making sure I know where I want that table to be. I'm going to add some foam dots here. And then once I have that in place, I'm going to add some 1/8 inch foam tape just along the top edge of that table. Well, the table, I guess, countertop. I'll peel away the backing and press that into place. And then I'm going to add a little bit of glue underneath that just to help that stick down to my table base. Gonna add some foam dots just behind the top portion of her head there where she doesn't have any foam behind her. Make sure that's nice and even. And then I'll add some art glitter glue and press her into place as well. I wanted to add some glasses to him, so I'm just very carefully pressing this into place. I don't like to do that kind of stuff at the end because that could have ruined the whole card, but I was very, very careful. And then lastly, I wanted to add sort of a cloud burst coming out of her beaker. So I will color that in with a Copic there. I sort of liked the idea of matching the darker beaker with the lighter cloud. I thought that kind of gave the look of a lighter sort of see-through smoke. I did add 2 foam dots behind there, one on top of the other, just to have that pressed up a little bit more in front of her. And I added a little bit of glue there where it overlaps. And then for the inside, I'm on a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, stamped out the sentiment "Let's Bond." I've trimmed off about 1/4 inch of that tropical teal, added some 1/8 inch Scor-Tape behind it, and I will place that along the bottom of my panel. I'll add some ATG to the back, place that on the inside of my card base, and that will complete card number 5. I did go ahead and add glossy accents to his glasses and the beakers, and I have cut that out just for the sake of time in the video, but I have done that to the front of all of the cards if they had glasses and if they had beakers. So this last one is going to be a simple one again. I've got a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. I've lined up my little girl there and her clouds of smoke. And here I've stamped out the sentiment, "You make my heart go boom." I did do a little stamp surgery so I could get that on 2 lines. I stamped that out and then thought it was over just a little too far. So I've just sort of flipped over my panel and moved that over ever so slightly to give myself a little bit more of a border. And I'll just stamp that one more time. I'm going to add some art glitter glue behind my girl here and press her into place. And then for my clouds, I'm going to pop those up with some foam dots. I originally did just 2 of those, and then off camera as I was going back through things, I did pull in another one of those vellum clouds, and I've added that. You'll see that in the final photo as well as on the photos on my blog post. So I've added some ATG to that panel and placed that down on a card base made from Stamp Market Party cardstock. On the inside, I've got another Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. I've stamped out "We Have Serious Chemistry," and I'm going to do a line of beakers here along the bottom, then adding another puff of that smoke above the blue one. Here I'm adding just a little bit of my N0 Copic just to give that a little bit of shadow. I did that on the ones on the front as well. And I'll glue that into place. Adding some ATG to the back here, and I'll place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 6. Here are a few close-ups of the finished cards. In the description box below, you'll find my blog post, which has additional photos and links to the supplies I used. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.